Hey guys, this is Brad from Lucky 7 Racing and the Cars, Coffee, Donuts automotive events that happen throughout Southern California. And I'm back at the workbench today playing around with the RC cars again. The last video you guys saw me do was based on the Tamiya TT01E Euro Spec truck, which I put together and did some test runs with. Haven't had a chance to really get that out and go racing with it. I've had some other things going on, and hopefully later on this year I'll be able to run that a little bit. But for now, I've actually converted over one of my other vehicles for something that's becoming really popular, which is no prep RC drag racing. Now, a lot of that is based off of what you may have seen on the Discovery Channel Street Outlaws show, where guys are taking muscle cars, pretty high horsepower cars, and they're going drag racing with them in a no prep surface situation where they just run them on whatever surface they have. They're not putting down any sort of traction compound. They're not doing any VHT like you would see on a prep surface. A lot of these vehicles are based off of the short course trucks. So if you have a Traxxas Slash on the Associated Short Course truck, I've seen some guys that have converted over the Team Losi vehicle as well, and they're able to build one of these. This is based off of the Associated Short Course Buggy, which of course carries over parts from the B4 Buggy, the T4 truck, and the Associated SC10 Short Course two-wheel drive truck. So what you see here can convert over to one of those. And if you have one of those, I'm going to have a full parts list at the end of the video so you guys can kind of take a look and build your own. So getting into this a little bit, what I've taken is the Proline 69 Chevy Nova body, which I really like the body lines on it. It's an iconic muscle car. A lot of guys use them for drag racing. Some guys just restore the full-size car and just go cruising with them. But to me, this is a good looking muscle car and a really good way to start off this platform for what we're doing. So getting into the chassis itself, the body from falling here. The front end is essentially converted to the smaller B4 front end. What I had to do is run B4 front suspension arms and the B4 shock tower, and essentially the shorter shocks. I could have stuck with the factory shock tower from the short course buggy because it really wasn't all that tall, but because I wanted to make sure I had the right amount of clearance, I went with the shorter shock tower instead, and everything bolts right up because it's all based off of the same chassis, so I didn't have to do any kind of excessive drilling. I didn't have to change anything around. It was just taking parts off, putting parts back on. Because everything got shortened up, I had to change out the control links, so the camber and toe links are that for the Associated B4 Buggy, and of course use RPM ball cups. Now, I was lucky enough to find all these parts in my local hobby store, and I was able to do the conversion, essentially a little bit of time, some of my wrenches, and I was off and running. That's pretty much all there is to the front end, so there's not much really involved. It's a pretty easy conversion for up front. Now for the back, there was a little bit involved, and essentially it's the same thing. You're converting everything over to what the B4 Buggy would have had. So the rear shock tower, which is a shorter shock tower, and the rear arms, which of course narrow the rear end so that you can fit the bigger wheel and tire package on the rear. Now what's really interesting is that the rear shocks are actually front buggy shocks. The reason being is that you don't need a lot of suspension travel because we're not taking this thing off-road. You don't need the long travel. You actually need less travel and a little bit of a stiffer setup, which I'll get more into the setup in another video. For now, we're just going over the parts for what I took to put all this together. The rest of the rear end was put together with essentially the same B4 rear control links, RPM ball cups, and I went with the MIP CVDs in the back. The reason being is that the standard rear dog bone may not be able to handle the amount of power that I plan on putting to this. Now, a lot of guys that run, say, a modified class where you have a lot more power and a lot more battery, essentially in drag racing, there's even more power being put to it. Now, the standard dog bone may work, but I think the CVDs will be able to handle the power a little bit better. So I'm going to go with that and see what happens. The rest of the vehicle has pretty much been left alone. I still have to figure out what I'm going to do with this as far as a rear wheelie bar. The one that I've seen mounted to some of these is a little bit of a different setup than what I have here. The rear motor cage, as it's called, is designed slightly differently on the short course buggy compared to the short course trucks and some of the other vehicles that are out there. So I may have to do some modifications to make that work, but we'll have that in another video for later on. The wheel and tire package is actually really unique because I went with what J Concepts offers. Now the wheels essentially are a five-star wheel. They look a little bit like the real thing that you would see from, say, Weld Racing or some of the other manufacturers on the market. And they come as a 4-pack, so you get the front and the rear wheels together in one package. The tires, of course, are separate. I went with the rear slicks from J Concepts, which is their drag slick. It's the green compound, which is their softer compound. And then the front wheels are more of a ribbed wheel, which you would see on like the full-size counterparts that emulates a lot of that. So that's pretty much all there is to it. I still have a few other things to do, which is getting the body mounts figured out. I am actually using the Short Course SC10 6.1 body mounts because from what I saw on Jane Concepts website, that's what they used on their build. Well, their build was based on of the B5 and B6 buggy chassis, which is a little bit different. That's a mid-motor chassis, it's a mid-transmission, whereas this is a rear motor, rear transmission setup. So I'm going to have to do some modifications to make that work on the front and the rear in order to get the body to mount up right. I still have to paint the body, I still have to glue the wheels to the tires, so there's still some things going on there, and then of course putting the power to it. More than likely I'm going to be going with what Fantom Racing offers. One of the reasons being is because I already use the Fantom Racing ESC and motor in my regular off-road buggy, and I really like the products. They're easy to tune, easy to adjust, and they make good power, so I'm looking at that as far as a power option. The battery for this, I could go with a little bit of a shorter battery, the shorty battery pack, because of the way that the chassis is designed, or I could go with a little bit of a longer battery pack. Now in drag racing, weight distribution is definitely key here. You don't want the front end to come up off the ground too much. You want to be able to keep it flat, and the longer battery moved forward may help with that, but I won't know until I start making test hits. So essentially, that's all there is to it. I still have to go in and set up the suspension. I kind of have things mocked up here as far as where I want it, but I have to go in and change out springs, oil, make my adjustments as far as the angle of the shocks. I'm going to get into that in another video. But for now, I'm going to go back, I'm going to take a look at what I have, I'm going to button some things up and go from there. So next time you guys come back and see this video, or the next video, hopefully we're going to be making test hits. I'll have the power to it. I'll go over a little bit of the different setups that I have an idea of for this vehicle. I actually came from drag racing, and I spent the better part of 20 years running in Las Vegas, Pomona, Arizona, going to big national events and competing in full-size cars. So I'm going to apply a little bit of my knowledge there for chassis setup to this and see what we can do to make some good hits. For now, this is Brad from Monkey7 Racing and the Cars, Coffee, and Donuts automotive events throughout Southern California. I hope you see you guys at the racetrack.